Now, my actual topic tonight, though, is not my facial hair or lack thereof or Dr. Hartman. It is, as you know, grace and nature. Okay, so for my talk, I'm going to give those terms a pretty wide and loose meaning. I will use these terms to designate two general realms of experience, okay? So by grace, I mean religious things. Religious things. The kind of stuff you learn about in theology class, but also the kind of stuff you hear about in your parish church on Sunday. Now, by nature, I don't mean just frogs and flowers. I mean whatever we normally experience, whatever is not supernatural, what normally happens. So I'd like to talk to you tonight then about how these two realms, nature and grace, exist together harmoniously. It's not nature or grace, it's nature and grace. Yes, it's that bad. That's what we do in philosophy. It comes down to conjunctions, okay? Nature and grace. Now, not everyone believes this. Some people find religion kind of distasteful. There's that television personality, I don't know how to say his name, Bill Maher, is that right? Bill Maher. He made this movie Religulous, right? He's kind of what I would call a nature-only kind of guy. He doesn't have a lot of use for religion. But there are also religion-only people. These are the kind of people who get very irritated with me, with philosophy. We have an ancient Christian writer, I always mess him up, Mr. Gibson will have to correct me, Tertullian, I think was his name, and he has this great quote, "What has Athens to do with Jerusalem?" Athens standing for philosophy and nature, Jerusalem standing for grace, okay? But the Catholic thing is to try to get these two together, nature and grace. So our team captain, St. Thomas Aquinas, is famous for saying that, quote, "Grace builds on and perfects nature." In other words, there is only one truth, but it can be approached from either the side of grace or from the side of nature. So on the side of grace, again, you can learn what is true through things like faith, worship, and theology class. On the side of nature, you can be put in contact with the truth through things like art, philosophy, science, and just experience. Maybe even sports, I don't know. So the point is you don't have to exclusively choose nature or grace. There's continuity between them. Let me explain it in terms of sports. I see some of my sports guys here. Okay, it's like this. Nature and grace are not like the Redskins and the Cowboys. Because you can't be a fan of those two teams, can you? They are mutually incompatible. You will get in a fist fight, very likely when you wear your special Cowboys jacket to the Skins game, okay? Rather, what nature and grace are like a minor league baseball team and its major league affiliate, like the Memphis Redbirds and the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, they're not the same thing. As you know, one is much more powerful than the other. In fact, you Nats fans learned that very painfully last night if you watched the game. The Cardinals are more powerful than the Redbirds. However, they're kind of in the same game, right? They reinforce one another. This is what I'm trying to argue for tonight with nature and grace. All right? Now, so far, I know this is kind of boring, this is kind of academic, right? This is the kind of thing, you make your little notes, you write your reflection paper, I give you extra credit, or you write it on Mr. Gibson's test, and he's very pleased with you, you spit it all back out. But what I want to do is make this more concrete for you. And how I propose to do that is to horrify you a little bit. What I would like to do tonight, I'm going to pick 3 things I think are very weird in Catholicism. Things that to the perfectly normal person, Mr. Schimpf, are just strange. And then what I'm going to try to convince you of is that if you come at these weird things of grace from the side of nature, they're no longer quite so weird. There's a natural basis that grace is building upon. All right? Now you're wondering what things. You're probably thinking, I'm going to pick normal things, like I'm going to talk about how pictures work and then religious icons. Or I'm going to talk about Aristotle's metaphysics, substance and accident, and then the Holy Eucharist. No, no, no. Here's what we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about miracles, like your grandma believes in. Then we're going to talk about the mystical body of Christ. Yeah. And then we're going to talk about heaven, the beatific vision of God in heaven. That's the appropriate look for those topics. Yeah, they aren't fun. They're weird, all right? So first, miracles. Now, miracles are pretty close to the heart of Catholicism, okay? We're a miracle religion. Now, you may want to object if you're smart. My students know that I like objections. I like it when you argue with me. All religions have miracle stories, right? All of them do. The Buddha does miraculous things. Muhammad did miraculous things. Even Confucius does miraculous things, although he mostly just writes boring scrolls. But anyway, all of them. But my contention is that Catholicism takes it to a whole new level. We don't just have the miracles at our beginning, like Jesus walking on water and rising from the dead. We have them all the way through, right? How do you get canonized as saints in the Catholic Church? I'm tired of talking. Someone talk to me, yell out. What do you need to get canonized as saint? Yes, 2 miracles. I hope that's what you said. All I really heard is miracles and then like wheels back there. But yeah, 2 miracles, 2 documented miracles, okay? Now, don't let the institutionalization of this blind you to the weirdness though. Miracles are still weird. Like John Paul II, his first miracle, you have this French nun, and she's not a nun like Mother Teresa. She's not famous. She's the French nun with Parkinson's disease. And her community is praying through the intercession of John Paul II for her cure. So one night her superior has her come over and has her write in excruciating pain the name John Paul II on a piece of paper. That's around dinner time. By bedtime, she can suddenly write easily. She gets her first good night's sleep in forever that night, and within 2 months, Parkinson's is gone. That's weird, right? That's weird in a good way. There's also weird in a weird way, which is like St. Januarius. 3 times a year, this guy's blood, which they keep in little vials, liquefies. Normally it's like dried little flakes. You're like, that's fake, that's red pepper flakes. But 3 times a year, it liquefies on his feast days. Yeah, a little weirder now. Or the other day, I told my students about this a bit. I was trying to explain to 7th grade boys what the stigmata is. Are you familiar? If you're familiar with this term, just kind of nod your head. You don't have to tell me, but just nod your head. So they were asking me about St. Francis. They have this saint project going on, and they're looking for a saint to pick. I'm like, oh yeah, St. Francis is great. He's got the stigmata. And they're like, what's that? I'm like, oh, they just happen to have the wounds of Jesus Christ in their hands and feet and side, and their mouths actually dropped open, just like in a movie. And you can tell the question they wanted to ask me, do you actually believe that? That's so weird, that's unbelievable. So what I want to argue with you briefly is, miracles are weird, but they aren't too weird to believe in, because there is such a thing as a natural miracle, all right? Or what I would call a little miracle, a low-level miracle that has nothing to do with religion whatsoever. So you can see this either just in the natural world or in the human realm. So in the natural world, I mean stuff like snakes that are born with 2 heads. You ever looked up those pictures on the internet? You should. Type in 2-headed snake. It's worth 5 minutes. Or every now and again, it'll just rain dead birds. What's that? That's weird. You don't want to call it a miracle because it's creepy, but it is kind of a miracle, right? Or just more sophisticated, wave-particle duality. Or just quantum physics generally. I don't understand it. It's weird. It doesn't seem like science, all right? But think also of the human realm. There are human miracles. Now, I learned this lesson the hard way when I was about your age. I was at Indiana University, and I went to the office of this very famous professor there, Henry H.H. Remarque. A German Jew, had got out of World War II before the Holocaust and was a complete atheist. So I'm in his office and he finds out that I'm Catholic. And he starts expressing to me his incredible admiration for the Catholic Church. Oh, I love the church. I love the miracles, the art. So I'm a fired up young man about the faith. I go in for the kill. I said, well, Dr. Remarque, And I can almost see myself now as the one who converted Dr. Emack. I said, if you believe in miracles, why aren't you Catholic? Don't miracles show the hand of God in our lives? You know, can you see my halo? I mean, it was just beautiful. His response floored me. He said, what? There are miracles all the time. And I'm just looking at him. He's like, you're American, right? What do you think Abraham Lincoln is? He continues, as all good professors do when they've got a student stranded in the headlights. He said, that guy lived in a dirty little shack in Indiana, right? He should have grown up to be the king of the hillbillies. Instead, Abraham Lincoln grows up to be our finest American orator, the president who wins the Civil War, the president who frees the slaves. Abraham Lincoln, he said, is a miracle. So, yeah, I lost that round. Or, soon you're going to read arguably the best book on earth after the Bible, Mr. Gibson, after the Bible, which is called Aristotle's Ethics, okay? And in Aristotle's Ethics, he talks about the different kinds of what his word? I don't know what his Greek word is, but the English word is characters into which human beings can fall. So he talks about weak people, people who know the right thing to do, but they're just too weak. Like me with the Boston cream donut. I just can't resist it. He talks about strong people, people who overcome themselves. He talks about virtuous people. These are people who know the right thing to do and want to do it. It's that, like your grandma, she knows it's right to make you dinner, but she also just wants to do it, all right? Virtuous, your grandma. But there's this other category, even higher than the virtuous man, called the divine man. And the divine man he doesn't say much about, but he gives a telling example. His example is Hector, the ancient Trojan Hector. Now, I think I already told my class about Hector a little bit, but the deal with Hector is he was the second greatest warrior in the ancient world, second only to Achilles, who, as you know from the movie Troy with Brad Pitt in his loincloth, was a really tough guy, right? Hector was also the prince of Troy, right? He's the heir to the throne. So, Hector's incredibly powerful and incredibly rich. What should Hector have been like? Hector should have been a jerk. But instead, Hector is a devoted husband and father. In the Iliad, at one point, Hector leaves battle, comes back home, is covered with blood and everything, just to come and kind of play with his baby. He picks up his baby, the baby starts crying, he takes his helmet off so the baby will recognize him. This is Hector. He's a divine man. He's a miracle. He's greater than the virtuous. No one knows why he was the way he was, why he was so good. Now, one more example for my sports people. You all read this book over the summer, right? Several times, the primer. You read it every day. So, you will know what I'm about to talk about. The David Foster Wallace piece about Roger Federer, the tennis player, right? Do you remember this? Claire remembers it. People remember it, yeah. Remember what he says about Federer? He starts off this little passage just being a fanboy. Federer's forehand is a great liquid whip. His backhand a one-hander that he can drive flat, load with topspin or slice. And he goes on and on about how Federer plays. So you're already thinking, okay, this is a little creepy. But then the last paragraph, he gets religious. He gets metaphysical. He says, Roger Federer is one of those rare, preternatural athletes who appear to be exempt, at least in part, from certain physical laws. And he concludes, I think Federer may be a creature whose body is flesh and somehow light. Right. But he has a point, doesn't he? Federer, I think most people now consider him about the number 6 player in the world, but most people do consider him to be the greatest tennis player of all time. And in that same piece, he talks about other athletes like that. Michael Jordan, Gretzky, Ali, people like that, where they just seem to violate physical laws. They are miracles, I would say. So the point I'm trying to make is that we sometimes have this sense that there's a normal world where everything happens totally expectedly, and then there are these amazing religious miracles. That's actually not reality. Rather, you have a world out there where things do happen with regularity, but with some surprise built in. Things can happen that shouldn't happen every now and then. So why then, if that's how things just naturally are, why is it such a stretch to believe in a religious miracle, right? It's just further along the continuum. It's just more powerful with a higher purpose, but it's still a surprise, fundamentally, just like all these other things, okay? Now that's point one, and you're thinking, this is weird, I wish I hadn't come, I could be in my dorm room. I'm just getting warmed up. No, because now we go to my next topic, which I introduced as the mystical body of Christ, right? Because I want to sound theologically astute. I don't really know what that means except just the church is big on community stuff, right? Like in Catholicism, you don't just get to pray in your house on Sunday, right? No, where do you have to go? To a church, very good, right? You go to Mass. Otherwise, you've committed a grave sin, right? It's very important, all right? So the church takes this stuff very seriously. But here is the weirdest aspect of this communal part of the church. You ready for it? Donut Sunday. Do you know of what I speak? Yeah, if you've been, you know why it's weird. So, okay, here's the setup. For those of you, the uninitiated out there, here's how it goes. On Sunday, you get up, you put on your best duds, you go to Mass, and you worship the King of Kings, the creator of all reality, in this solemn, ritual way, receiving the Eucharist, the very body and blood of Christ. And then after that, you go to the parish hall. You drink bad coffee out of a styrofoam cup, and you eat a glazed donut. You try not to talk to people, but eventually you go up for a refill on your coffee, and what happens? The four old men, if you're a guy, the four old men gather around you, and they're like, hey, are you a knight? And you're like, no, sir, I'm not a knight presently. And they're like, oh, have you thought about being a knight? And, and you're stalling for time now, so you're just like, well, guys, what does it involve? And then they can't tell you because it's a secret. But they kind of they look around and they eventually let slip a little bit. It somehow involves life insurance and a weekly poker game. But all the rest of it you can't know about, all right? So this is weird. I have goosebumps just talking about this. I mean, maybe it's better for girls, but I've also seen some real aggression from the women's rosary sodality. I've seen a similar thing happen, all right? So Donut Sunday is weird. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why? Okay? Now, what I want to suggest to you, just like with miracles, is after building up the weirdness, I want to tell you, oh, but it's not that weird, okay? I want to give you an argument that it's not weird, and here's why. To be human is to be relational, to participate in a community of persons. The fancy word I want you to write down so you can put in your papers and impress your teachers is human beings, human persons are intersubjective. Intersubjective. That's one of those things you say in class to look smart, right? Like, well, Mr. Gibson, this doesn't sit right with the intersubjectivity of the human person. And then you see if you can respond. You got to challenge your teachers that way. Not me, because you know I can handle it, but everyone else. All right, so here's my evidence for this mysterious intersubjectivity. Let's talk about Aristotle again. Aristotle, the greatest philosopher who has ever lived. He wrote a book called The Politics, and it's supposed to be the sequel to the book The Ethics, right? So if you can't be ethical, at least be political. Yeah, anyway, so that's the idea. But in The Politics, Aristotle tries to explain to you what a nation is by showing you how it comes about, how it grows, okay? So he starts small and then works his way up. So we progress through the clan, the village, and eventually we get to this big self-sufficient entity, the city-state, right, which is like a nation. But where he starts is very interesting. He doesn't start where you think he's going to start. He doesn't start with a bunch of individuals in the Priz food court drawing up a social contract, which we all then sign, making me king. No, that's not where he starts. He starts, and I quote, "In the first place, there must be a union of those who cannot exist without each other, namely of male and female, that the race may continue. So Aristotle's smallest human unit is the family. He doesn't even think about people as isolated individuals. What you are as human is to already be born into a family. Every human being has a mother, right? This is the idea. Or to continue on Aristotle, in that book you're going to read the Ethics. I'll give you a little tidbit, so if you haven't read it yet, your teacher will think like you've just been reading it on your own and you're brilliant. In the Ethics, Aristotle is going to devote 2 books of it, or kind of like big chapters, to friendship. To friendship. That's more than he even talks about justice, okay? Now, here's some of the things he says about friendship. A friend is like another self, another you. Okay, that's already like, write that down. You can put it on like a homemade Valentine's Day card for someone, you know, and look really sensitive. But he goes on. He says that you understand yourself through your friends, that when you see your friend, you see yourself. Now we're getting kind of creepier, right? But still kind of cool, all right? He has more to say. He says, whatever is done by a friend is in some sense done by you. So it's like if your buddy hits the winning shot, the winning three-pointer in the basketball game, you get to rejoice in that, right? It's like it's been done by you, right? You're part of it, okay? And here's the biggest line. He says, friends are not optional, but are necessary for happiness. And here's the quote, for no one would choose the whole world on the condition of being alone. No one would choose the whole world on the condition of being alone. Now remember, Aristotle is not a flighty poet. Aristotle is not a rock star. Aristotle is the most boring human being imaginable. He's a philosopher. So if he says something, he means it. He thinks it's true, all right? That's how social we are, okay? Or for you theological types, recall that little excerpt from John Paul II that you read this summer, again in your primer, right? Now, he's talking there about young people, and he says, young people just, quote unquote, know that they must live for and with others. They know their life has meaning to the extent that it becomes a free gift for others, okay? So again, to be human is to be social. What's weird is not going to Donut Sunday. What's weird is scampering out of church, not shaking the priest's hand, going to your car, turning on your music. I don't even want to think about what your music is, you know? No, that's weird. The human thing to do is to go down to Donut Sunday, make friends, join the nights. Then you can go creep on other people when they get coffee. This is the human fullness, okay? This is the good thing to do. All right, so that's point 2 of weird things that are not weird, my talk tonight. Point 3. Now you're thinking I can't improve on the weirdness of Donut Sunday. You're thinking nothing is stranger. I have something stranger. The Catholic idea of heaven. Now, what does the Catholic Church think you do in heaven? Anyone know? I'll answer for you. You do something called the beatific vision. You contemplate God. Or there's this old movie, The Black Robe, and here's how that was put insultingly. You sit on a cloud and look at God. So, you know, I'm from Waterloo, Illinois, some of you know, and every year in the Waterloo Homecoming Parade, there's the Waterloo German Band. And the highlight of homecoming every year is just as they pull onto Main Street and get near the beer tent, they launch into their thrilling rendition of In Heaven There Ain't No Beer. And it's just pandemonium. People throw beers, people throw punches. I mean, it's just debauchery out there. But here's the point, they're right. There is no beer in heaven. There is no Xbox. You're not playing Frisbee with your puppy. You're looking at God. You're contemplating God. All right, so who's fired up to go to church now? Weird. It's weird. How do we draw people with this? This is what we promise them, the beatific vision. But again, it's actually not weird. It actually has to be that way if it's really going to be heaven. Okay? So here's my evidence. Now, as you can guess, I'm going to talk about Aristotle. But first, as a concession to you literary types, I'm going to talk about this little excerpt in the primer from Marilynne Robinson from a novel called Gilead. You recall this, right, from the summer? You read it over and over and over, right? Yeah, you did. All right, so in this excerpt, a young boy and his father had been spending the day tidying up the grave of the boy's grandfather, okay? And at the end of it, they're saying a prayer, and all of a sudden, there's a sudden event of beauty. On one, I think it's in the west, the sun is going down, but then somehow the moon has come up and is visible at the same time. And these two light sources kind of bathe everything in this mysterious light. It's very beautiful. And the little boy, his dad is busy saying this really solemn prayer, and the little boy kind of interrupts his dad to get him to see it. And the dad is actually shaken, okay? And later on, as they're walking home, the little boy reflects on it, or actually, it's complicated. This may be his reflection years later as an old man. But he thought what it showed, what that experience showed, is how amazing we are as human beings. That we have this capacity to, quote, experience things well beyond what you would never actually need. The human being, in other words, is almost overpowered in his capacity to experience. All they needed to do that day was clean up Grandpa's grave. They didn't have to have a mystical experience in the graveyard, but it happened. We have this capacity. Or for some more sober considerations, let's go to Aristotle. Now, your year began, some of you with Mr. Gibson and I, some of you with other teachers, talking about Aristotle's On the Soul. And Aristotle said, the soul is in a sense all things. And we had very erudite discussions of this. We were serious, we defined what the soul might mean, but no one was brave enough to stop and say, that's weird, right? Because think of it this way. What are you going to do on Thanksgiving break? What are you going to do? You're going to go home and you're going to gorge yourself like a bunch of little gluttons. You're going to eat in a way that you would never let your girlfriend see you eat back at CUA. I mean, just shoveling sweet potato casserole covered with marshmallows into your mouth. Then what are you going to do? You're going to sit there and watch football, and then you're going to fall asleep with Grandpa, and both of you are going to be snoring. Does your soul need to be all things to do that? No. You're a little overpowered, aren't you? You're too big for your own life. Or again, in Aristotle's Ethics, he talks about this weird fact that we like new things best. You have the most fun watching a movie when it's new. You like your girlfriend best when she's your new girlfriend. I know no, let's forget, never mind. Anyway, the point is you like new things. Now, everyone knows that, right? New is good, right? But because Aristotle was a philosopher, he can tell you why. The reason why is when something is new, your mind is most active in regard to it. You're still trying to figure it out, and that's fun, right? Because pleasure is linked to activity, and your mind is so active, it's most pleasurable. And then when it gets older and you know more about it, now you're not as active, it's not as pleasurable. Again, so what does that seem to suggest? It seems to suggest that we can never be fully happy. We can never really be in heaven unless we are contemplating something that was always new to us, ever new, always new aspects of it to discover. All right? So later on in the year 2, you're going to read this quote from St. Augustine if you do the Confessions. How does it go? Our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. Aw. I mean, don't you just see like some old lady praying a pink rosary when you hear that line? Like, it's just so pious. But maybe it's doctrinal too, right? Think of this. Again, we have this huge capacity to contemplate, this huge capacity to experience. And so our heart can never rest unless we had something up to the task, something that could really invigorate our mind in that way, because the mind and heart are linked. If the mind is active, the heart can rest. Okay? All right, so maybe this idea then of sitting on a cloud looking at God, of the beatific vision, maybe that's not so weird now, right? That's kind of like what we want even in this life, but we can't ever quite have it. Everything falls short. So there is a natural basis, even for this, in what we are as human beings. Okay, so to review. Now to kind of take notes again, get ready to write your papers. So my topic tonight has been the harmony between what is naturally true and the higher realities revealed to us by grace. I have suggested to you that even the strangest aspects of our faith, which to me are miracles, the Catholic idea of heaven, and of course, Donut Sunday, especially Donut Sunday, they just seem to actually extend and make more noble natural truths and natural realities. They're in continuity with what we are, with the way things are. And I think this is a good thing, right? Because otherwise, if grace overturned everything, if heaven was totally different, if miracles were just a complete violation of the natural order, if Donut Sunday was like crucifixion, right, then that would almost be like saying God makes mistakes. God set things up, but now he's got to fix the problem. No, God doesn't make mistakes, and that's why grace builds on nature. It perfects it. There is continuity, grace and nature.